Hello and welcome to another Tri-tutors video. In today's video we're going to be discussing Shakespeare's Hamlet, and we're going to be specifically looking at each of the main characters and discussing some of their key traits. So we obviously have to start with the protagonist himself, Hamlet. So Hamlet is a tragic hero. He's an overthinker, he's indecisive, he's intellectual, he's an academic. He's a complex character and he is extremely contemplative. So a tragic hero is typically a protagonist. Typically they're well-respected, noble, intentioned people, and they have one fatal flaw, and that fatal flaw leads to their demise. So Hamlet's fatal flaw is his indecisiveness, and that ultimately leads to his death. So Hamlet is extremely indecisive. He is an overthinker to the point where he is led towards inaction in his delay to act against Claudius. So when he is given the instruction to avenge his father by the ghost of King Hamlet, he really wants to do it because in those times that was the noble, honorable thing to do. It was that you avenged someone's death and you killed the perpetrator. And so he wants to kill Claudius, and there's really no love lost between him and Claudius, but he wants to be absolutely certain about how it happened, why it happened. He wants all the different facts. He's very much an intellectual academic in that regard. And so he keeps delaying it, and he keeps being indecisive about how he should kill him, why he should kill him, etc. Hamlet is Shakespeare's longest play, and I think a lot of the reason is because of Hamlet himself. A lot of the times we are taken away from the plot with Hamlet's long soliloquies about life and death and circumstance and all these different things. So he's a really fascinating character, and we need to understand him in terms of the plot, but also in terms of the comments about life and death that he brings to the table. Claudius is our antagonist. He is a master manipulator. He manipulates Gertrude, he manipulates Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, he manipulates Hamlet to an extent, and he definitely manipulates Laertes in the final two acts. He is ruthless and untrustworthy, so he is very clearly our antagonist, and I think it's quite interesting that you have a very clear, obvious antagonist, and yet you have a protagonist who is unable to act against him. Then we have Gertrude. Gertrude is Hamlet's mother, who also is married to She marries Claudius soon after the death of King Hamlet. She is disempowered and weak. So my argument about the women in this play is that they're not perceived to be strong at all. They're actually, they've put in quite a disempowering position, because our two main female characters, Gertrude and Ophelia, are both seen to be disempowered, and Hamlet makes remarks about them, very degrading remarks about their intelligence and about their sort of status. He really does not have any respect for Gertrude at all, which is easy to see why, because she goes from King Hamlet to Claudius very quickly. She doesn't seem to think there's anything wrong with that, and if you read even just Act 1, you can see that mounting anger that Hamlet has for his mother Gertrude. King Hamlet, or the ghost. So this is the ghost of Hamlet's father who sets the whole plot for revenge in motion. He comes in Act 1, and he won't talk to anyone except for Hamlet. And this is significant because, well, we can understand that maybe nothing would have been done if it wasn't for the ghost actually giving Hamlet an inkling of how his death was actually carried out, that it was Claudius who killed him, and asking his son to avenge him. Now, ghosts in Shakespeare are very common, and it was a sort of different time where the presence of ghosts wasn't something questionable like we think of it today. So obviously, if you think about the symbolism of a ghost, unfinished business, Hamlet's father cannot rest, his killer is still out there, who has actually married his wife as well and taken over his kingdom. So just understand the ghost, as much as it's seems supernatural, and it is, it was a lot more acceptable during Shakespeare's time. Then we have Horatio. Horatio is Hamlet's confidant. He talks to him and as much as Claudius thinks Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are Hamlet's friends, Horatio is actually the one person who Hamlet sort of vents to and contemplates life and death. And Horatio is the one who actually informs Hamlet of the ghost in the first place. Then we have Polonius. He is a servant in the royal household in Elsinore, in the Palace of Elsinore, Denmark. But he is quite a manipulative mastermind, and he's incredibly nosy, which is how he dies, by being nosy. He is Laertes and Ophelia's father, and he believes that Hamlet is in love with Ophelia, and he plots with Claudius in order to prove this point. He manipulates Ophelia into saying certain things to Hamlet, and he actually, when he dies, he is hiding behind a tapestry in Gertrude's room, and beforehand he's trying to convince her to go harshly on Hamlet, and Hamlet hears a disturbance and thinks that Claudius goes and stabs him, but it's actually Polonius. And this is obviously important for later events because Laertes is going to return from university as a result of his father's death and start plotting against Hamlet. Ophelia, Laertes' sister, Polonius' daughter, Hamlet's supposed love interest. She becomes deeply depressed. We do have this understanding that there is a connection between Ophelia and Hamlet, but Hamlet, in his quest to feign madness, really rebukes her in a heart-wrenching, violent way, and she descends into this depression that when Laertes arrives home, he's like quite irritated or frustrated with the fact that she's the way she's become. She's also deeply affected by her father's death, it seems, but mainly by Hamlet's cutting words towards her. And she eventually drowns, and that gives Laertes even more impetus to get revenge on Hamlet because he blames her madness on Hamlet. So you can see the theme of madness swooping in or coming into many different characters. So Laertes, he is Ophelia's brother, and he is manipulated by Claudius. So when he arrives back from university, Claudius manipulates him into believing that Hamlet is at fault for absolutely everything, and they come up and they devise a plan as to how they're going to destroy Hamlet. But in that process, during the duel, Laertes is also going to die. So it is a true Shakespearean tragedy in terms of many different characters dying. He is obviously heartbroken by his father's death and then Ophelia's death, and he wants to get revenge on Hamlet. And as much as he's heartbroken about his father and his sister, it's also about honor, and I'll talk about that when I talk about the themes in another video. But this idea of honor, he needs to protect his family's honor and his own honor by fighting Hamlet and ensuring that Hamlet that he can avenge, just like Hamlet is tasked with avenging his father's death. He needs to avenge his father and sister's death to protect his honor. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, two of my favorite characters. They're Hamlet's childhood friends who are fooled by his madness and manipulated by Claudius. A lot of the comedy comes through them because they are totally oblivious to the fact that they are being manipulated by Claudius into finding out what's wrong with Hamlet, but also they're being manipulated by Hamlet because Hamlet makes them believe that he's totally mad. So they're really quite entertaining characters, and they really have no substance, and they're really quite stupid in terms of not understanding how they're being manipulated. Osric is not such an important character, but for some reason in the DBE papers, they asked this for contextual questions. I've seen it a few times. So Osric is the messenger who comes to tell Hamlet about Laertes' jewel that he's offering him. And they just have this brief interaction where Hamlet sort of makes fun of Osric's stupidity. They just have a small back and forth, but if they ask you about Osric, he's the messenger who delivers the news to Hamlet that Laertes wants a duel. And lastly, Fortinbras, he is the king of Norway who takes over Denmark at the end of the play. He's introduced right at the beginning as there's this sort of whole history with Norway and Denmark. And later on in the play, as Hamlet is dying, Fortinbras arrives to take over. He is quite honorable in the sense that as Hamlet's dying, he promises that Hamlet shall have a, well, not as he's dying, but after he dies, after Hamlet has proclaimed, he wishes to be remembered in a certain way, then Fortinbras grants him a sort of hero's funeral. I hope that was helpful. I'll see you in the next video.